Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and today I'm doing my June wrap-up, and I was a little bit late. June really snuck up on me, so I didn't get to reading Pride Month related things until the last half of the month, because it was like June 10th or so, and I was like, it's Pride Month. I wanted to read a bunch of LGBTQIAP books, and I haven't requested them yet, so I finally did. I also read a few non-queer books this second half of the month, and I'm going to be reviewing them in the order that I read them. And so the first half is going to be less queer, and the second half is going to be very queer. I will try to put the timestamps in the description, and I will put an asterisk if they are queer. But the first book that I read in the second half of the month was The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics, and this is very gay because it is about a lesbian and a bi woman falling in love. It is a Regency romance, or whatever that era was, Jane Austen time, and it is about a lady scientist, specifically an astronomer, and a lady whose late husband was a scientist and also the thing where they give money. Patron of the sciences. And so now she is a patron of the sciences by herself, and so she ends up getting connected with this young lady astronomer and sponsoring her, and figuring out that she is not as heterosexual as she thought she was, because this girl's cute. There are 11 books that I'm going to be telling you about today, and so I'm trying to make this not be a 50-minute video because somebody might want to watch it, but I really don't want to edit it. So I'm going to mostly skip over the plot summary portion. I usually like plot summaries because often descriptions of books now and like blurbs don't give plot summaries. They just try to advertise and sell you the book. And sometimes a plot summary is really helpful in whether I actually want this book. But I'm just going to touch on key points because there are several books that I want to rant about, at least one little subject of that book. And so in this case, I want to tell you that there are two main subjects that this book looks at. A lot of historical romances will look at issues of the time, like social issues, like racism, sexism. In this particular case, it very specifically looks at two things that are of high interest to me, which are the erasure of women in the sciences and the demeaning of women's art, or any type of art that women mainly do is classified as handicrafts, as opposed to fine arts like sculpture and painting that were mainly done by men in those times. And this goes into a lot of detail on both of those topics, and I absolutely love that, because the lady who our astronomer has her romance with is an embroiderer, like a big time embroiderer. Like, she loves to do it and she makes glorious designs, and there was so much talk about that. I've talked about this a little bit before when I was talking about the Dragon Slippers series that has a main character who's an embroiderer, and I just love that so much. And I loved that it was showing how artistic and wonderful women's artwork is when that has been severely demeaned in the past. And this had so much about that, and so much about women in the sciences and how they are erased, and was all about bringing the main characters to realizing that other women were doing these glorious, amazing things, and that they wanted to find these women and lift them up. And Catherine, who is the lady, realizing that what she does is art and being able to take value from that. It was so meaningful and beautiful. And I had heard about this book from a few people, but the person who most recently recommended it to me and reminded me of it in time for Pride Month was Fadwa from Word Wonders, specifically with her video that was giving recommendations based on all the colors of the rainbow. I will link that video below because it's awesome. Also, because you need to watch Fadwa's videos because her eyeshadow game is on point and definitely inspired the rainbow eyeshadow. And hers is much better than mine. She has much brighter pigments, and she is pretty great at makeup, and she also has really good ideas about books. And I'm really glad that she reminded me of the existence of this book because it was amazing. Next, I was still in the historical romance mood, and I had been wanting to try out some indie books and give reviews to them because I want to help lift up indie authors. The thing about reading indie books, it's like searching for diamonds in the rough. There's a lot of people didn't try that hard books out there, or people only wrote one draft and then just published that, but there are also diamonds who get ignored, and so that's why I still do the reading. But in this case, I read one of the rough books, which was Engaged to a Friend, and it might be out now. It wasn't out yet when I reviewed it. I got it through an ARC company site thing, and it was, you know, a friends to lovers trope, except that we didn't get to see the actual friendship. It was a lot of saying that they were friends without actually showing the friendship, and was just generally extremely repetitive and didn't look at any social issues. What am I doing? Anyway, didn't look at any social issues, didn't look at anything, didn't have any interesting side characters, just had best friends for each of the main characters to bounce off how they feel about this other person with, and it was very boring. But anyway, on from that, I read Dear Martin, which I was reminded of the existence of, and what came heavily recommended from Seiji from The Artisan Geek. She is a really wonderful booktuber who recently hit 25,000 subscribers, and I don't remember exactly where she was when I first started watching her, but it was a lot lower, and she has gotten more popular recently, and I'm so proud and happy for her because she totally deserves it. She does such in-depth reviews and in-depth topical videos, and she's also really funny. She does the occasional just silly comedy video, and she brings a lot of her great humor just to her regular reviews. But recently she did a review of Dear Martin, and it sounded like something I really wanted to read, so I did. And what was interesting about this one that was different from other contemporary books from the perspective of Black teenagers focusing on police brutality / racism is that this one was a lot more, I don't know the author and how the author feels, so I don't know if it was watered down or if, but it was just a lot more, I don't know how to say this, but it was a lot more, it seemed a lot less frustrated and angry at white people as a whole than other similar books that I have read. Not saying that that's wrong. I get mad at men as a whole. That's a valid thing. That was just kind of unexpected. There were several white characters who were very much the good guys, and the various endings that came to the police who were brutalizing people was a lot more consequential. There wasn't the frustration of them getting away with it, which was very unexpected, because as far as I know in the real world, they don't get killed. These specific ones who are brutalizing Black people don't usually end up dead. They usually get away with it, which is where the frustration comes from. I don't know, it was just a different feeling than I've had a lot, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, or if it's just good to have this voice and also have the other voices that are more like, would you shape up please? Obviously, Seiji's view is own voices, so I will link her review of it below. I recommend you look up other own voices reviews of this book, because I don't really know what to say about it other than I really liked it. It didn't really tell me anything I didn't already know, but it was just good to have it reinforced by yet another Black voice. And I enjoyed the characters, and I enjoyed the relationships, and I enjoyed the back and forth that the main character goes through, because the point is that he is writing letters to Martin Luther King, trying to figure out what MLK would do in his position and what he should do and what his thoughts are on all the racism around him and how he should react. And that was really fascinating. Then I was reading We Hunt the Flame, which once again I've heard several people recommend, but in this case Angelou was the one who finally got me to read it from Literature Science Alliance. We have fairly similar tastes, so I trust a lot of her recommendations. It was a bit hard to get through the first 100 and some pages. Nothing happens in the first 100 and some pages. It's all setup and characterization and world building, and I really like a lot of characterization and world building. I just prefer it to happen while we're on the adventure in like asides and the occasional flashback and, you know, stuff like that. I don't really like to have 100 pages of setup before they do anything. But once it actually picked up at like page 125, it was fun action, really interesting. I just wished that the author had like mashed up those two sections, because the world building is fascinating and the characters are fascinating. Also, in the first 100 pages, it felt a lot more like an adult book, the way that people reacted to things and the relationships that were going on. And then when it got to the action portion, it felt more like a YA book in the way people reacted to each other and had relationships and the action itself. So this is a bit of a age range straddler. It had really cool fantasy elements. I really like seeing those non-European ideas of how magic works. The characters were really interesting. The only part I didn't like really was the romance, because it was enemies to lovers, but not with that enemies to friends to lovers. It was just enemies with a lot of sexual tension to lovers type thing, which is totally not my thing, because I don't get the whole sexual tension thing. Doesn't make any sense to me. So I didn't like that very much, but I did like the other parts of their relationship. With, like, if it had been enemies to friends, I think I would have liked that better, because it did have the whole them learning and going back and forth between trusting each other and not trusting each other thing. That was interesting. And I also really liked the side characters, like Kifa. She was the coolest character in the book, but we didn't get very much time with her. And I also liked Altair, who is a secondary character who tags along with the main male character. I liked him a lot better than the main male character. But I think he'll be a bigger part in the next book, which is coming out very soon. So hopefully I will enjoy that one more. This one was like 3.5 stars if I did star ratings, whereas I think if the next book has more of those side characters, which I think it will, this seemed like more of an introduction to them. If it has more of those side characters, I think I will really like it. Oh, and I want to give you an update. I was reading The City We Became at the very beginning of June and the end of May, but I took too long to read it because I was in a very much audiobook slump. I did not want to listen to audiobooks right then, and it got taken back to the library because it was online and they could just take it away. I didn't have to give it back, they just took it from me. And that happened right when people started requesting a ton of books written by Black authors, which is really great. And I'm really happy for my area, because my specific area is quite conservative, and so I'm glad that even people in my area where this library works are gonna read these books. They're also reading a lot of books like White Fragility, Right Rage, Dear Martin, things like that, and I really hope that that will help improve the politics of my area. But that meant that there were suddenly, when I had been able to check it out, not having to wait in line the first time, now there were 6 requests for the audiobook and 9 requests for the ebook. Some people were probably also checking it out for Pride because it has queer characters, and so yeah, I haven't gotten that back yet, but I will read it as soon as possible, and I am more in an audiobook mode now, so I think I will actually be able to, you know, get a move on. I was about 45% in and I was really liking it. Then we have a memory called Empire, also recommended by Angela, and I'm really glad she recommended it because I don't read that much sci-fi. I really like sci-fi TV shows, but I don't read that much in books. It just has a different feel to it than fantasy, and I prefer fantasy, but I really love this particular sci-fi. It was fascinating. It's a little bit of a dystopian sort of feel because it is set in a society where machines kind of watch your every move, that type of thing, and it has some very corrupt leaders, and so it had that sort of creepy feel to it, but also had some really fun characters, and I didn't realize this going in, but it has queer characters. The main character is, I don't know if she also likes men, but she likes women, and she likes a particular woman in this book, and there is a romance between them, and I'm very pleased with that. I'm also very heated because I was reading about on Goodreads about it, and somebody was like, why is this LGBTQIA tag? And somebody else was like, I don't know why. There's a secondary character with a gay relationship, and there's some flirting between the main character and a woman, but it's all PG rated, me. It doesn't count. queer characters queer people are not automatically more sexual than any other people. It doesn't have to be a romance or have sexual content to be queer. That bothered me a lot. And I read that when I was only like partway through the book. As it went on, I was like, this is obviously romance. This is not a platonic relationship. Like, I'm somebody who likes to paint platonic over flicking everything because I love platonic relationships. Like, I paint Sherlock and Watson in the BBC series as platonic. Like, I have platonic glasses, but I could tell that this was not a platonic relationship. Anyway, I really loved the world building. It was glorious, and the characters were awesome, and a lot of funny and lighthearted and just heartwarming stuff was going on in the middle of a lot of dark content. Also a lot of politics, and they were really well done politics. Sometimes books do a lot of politics and it doesn't make sense, but this all made sense even though I was listening to an audiobook. Which is sometimes difficult to do. I did lose track of the names because the people in this book are named like a number, then a noun, any kind of noun. So like there's 3 seagrass and 12 azalea and 19 ads. My brain didn't have like a regular name with a regular connotation to latch onto, and so having the number at the beginning of every name was super confusing. But there were a few people who I actually remembered who this was, but the like 3rd tertiary characters, I was like, I don't remember who this is, and yet was relatively well able to track the politics, so that was really well done. Then because of We Hunt the Flame mostly, and also somewhat A Memory Called Empire, which despite being really interesting was also really long audiobook and a bit slow action wise, I was feeling my reading momentum kind of going screeching to a halt. So I went back to Beverly Jenkins and found out that my library actually does have the ebook of the other book in her Old West series. I'm just really bad at looking for things, and so I read that. It's called Breathless, and it is about the main character from Tempest's sister and how she falls in love and how she gets her business bookkeeping. That's what it's called. Getting her bookkeeping business off the ground. And it looks at women's suffrage and racism. Complaint that I have that was this book reminded me of, but that I have seen across the romance genre, especially historical romance and fantasy romance, is a thing where authors feel the need to have subdom sex scenes with every set of characters. I get that they're trying to appeal to a market, but not everybody wants to be told what to do while they're having sex. Could it be a little bit less pervasive, and could the sub not always be the woman? That's just a small complaint. Anyway, as usual with Beverly Jenkins, I really liked the characters, I really liked the social commentary, and I really liked that the main character beat up a guy who was harassing her. That was fun. I like that. In this case, the romance was a little less shippable than some of the others, but it was pretty good, and it definitely helped with my reading slump. I think I read it in a day and a half. Then throughout the month, I was reading I Shall Not Be Moved, which is a poetry collection by Maya Angelou, and I especially loved the titular poem, I Shall Not Be Moved, and I also really liked one that was about good and bad men. It was like about how some men are good, some men are bad, and you can't tell right away which is which. And sometimes I have trouble with being angry at all men, because they either are the bad guys or they let the bad guys get away with the crap they do. And this was about how, yeah, some men are crap and some aren't, and that's just the world we live in. Some men really are good people. And it was just written really beautifully. Also, not that many poetry writers can I read out their poetry and really feel like I'm getting the nuance and the rhythm right. Often I feel like they end their stanzas in really weird places that I don't feel the rhythm of, but I really felt the rhythm of Maya Angelou's work and really liked it. and it felt really natural, and I felt like I understood it. So that was really nice. Oh, also, I need to scoot over my new pink shelf. I have rearranged it because I got all those pink books for my book haul, so enjoy. Anyway, I really liked her writing, and a lot of her poems were really meaningful and special. Okay, now we're getting to the everything is gay portion. Firstly, The Rise of Kyoshi. I love this so much. I put off reading it for a long time because I didn't think that a book could capture the atmosphere and beauty of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is an animated show that I love, and I was wrong. It captured it so perfectly. The balance of the humor, where sometimes it's totally silly and they just inject that in the middle of totally serious moments, was so Atla-ish, and the world building was spot on. There was a load of politics that was built in that totally made sense for how the world could have been 300 or so years before the show takes place. The bending was awesome. There's just something really satisfying about the idea of lifting a big old rock and smashing it into someone. Also, bending in general, elemental magic, is really cool, like just fire shooting out of your fist and hitting someone, or water going whoosh, or air going whoosh. All the whooshing, flying around stuff, as Sokka calls it, is just so satisfying to read about and imagine. So I loved reading this, and I love the characters. Kyoshi is amazing. I mean, I always knew she was amazing, but I love getting to see more of her, and I love the female-female romance in this. It's so cute. It is with a firebender who is her friend and who is adorable and who is very firebender-ish while still being her own person. Oh, I loved it so much. And I also really like the explanation of why Kyoshi uses fans and this weird fan headdress and makeup when none of the other avatars do that. That was very cool and well built in. The bad guy was a little simplistically bad, but also people in the real world are sometimes really simplistically bad and just want to dominate the world, and they're bad people. So, you know, I don't really mind oversimplified bad guys because I see them in the real world a lot. Oh, and I saw this one in Fadwa's gay books for that go with Colors of the Rainbow video as well. So that video came with a lot of good recommendations. Then we have Dread Nation. It is about a zombie apocalypse happening during the Civil War. And the basic reasoning for why it happened then is that there were a crap ton of dead bodies rotting everywhere, and so some germs emerged that reanimated them. And like, yeah, that makes sense actually. And so it's like an alternative history of how things would have went if the US had basically called off the Civil War to fight zombies together, and thus the South had not been soundly trounced. And so we have like a mix of people trying to bring slavery back and Jim Crow type stuff going on with the black people in the country. It's a lot, and there are several trigger warnings for this, like there's an on-page whipping, there's some relatively vague descriptions of child abuse, and a lot of racism. But I really like the zombie killing portions. I think I've talked about before on this channel, I really like zombie apocalypse stories. I just haven't read that many because a lot of them are written by men, and I just don't like to read books written by men that much. But this one was written by a woman, and it was really good, and it had a main character who like chopped off zombies' heads with scythes. It was very cool, and also didn't realize this when I first decided to read it, but happens to be queer because the main character is bi, and a secondary character who she hangs out with a lot is aroace. So that was pretty awesome. The plot wasn't amazing. There were some things that weren't totally believable, but it's a zombie apocalypse story. What did you really expect? I really liked a lot of the characters. They were fascinating. The world building was really interesting. And I just liked it a lot. Then we have How to Be a Normal Person, which, once again, I can see the booktuber's face. And the booktuber who recommended it is non-binary. they are also ace, and so they recommended an ace book, and this is a gay romance where the main character is gray ace and the love interest is fully ace, who is kind of sex averse, kind of sex repulsed, somewhere in there, and I absolutely loved it. It was beautiful and so meaningful. It made me cry a lot, and it made me laugh almost like every other page. Like, even books that are supposed to be funny don't usually make me laugh that often, and apparently that's normal for this author, so I really look forward to reading his other books. But the main character, Gus, is described as being weird and abnormal in the synopsis, and I was thinking, that's not the best way to describe someone, except once you get into the book, you realize he's definitely autistic. He just doesn't know that. And I really hope that the author wrote that on purpose and wasn't just using a bunch of tropes for awkward people, because it was a really great representation of an autistic person. This guy has a very similar relationship with his dad to what I have with my mom, where I'm pretty emotionally dependent, and if she died it would be really bad, because this takes place a few years after Gus's father has died, and he has been pretty not really functional since then, especially socially. He has some friends because they've glommed onto him through no effort or acceptance of his own, but he is very socially anxious, very awkward. Fortunately, Gus doesn't have any financial troubles because his father was a landowner, landlord of a whole bunch of businesses, and owned the house that they lived in together outright. So Gus doesn't ever have to work a job in his life. He works to the extent that he goes over to the video rental store that his dad actually ran and worked at. Capitalistically, doesn't have a lot of value because it doesn't bring in money much at all. But it had emotional value to his dad and now to him because of its connection to his dad. And he has a very inlaid routine. The same things happen every day. He gets out of bed every morning saying today is going to be an okay day. He goes through his morning routine, goes to the coffee shop across the street, goes to his rental emporium like one more building over, and sits there until 11:54, I think, when the We Three Queens come in, who are a small Vespa gang, who we don't know if they're polyamorous lesbian lovers or if they are a trio of sisters, and they have sort of adopted him since they came to town a few years ago because he seemed like he needed a friend and they really liked this little mountain town, so let's just live here with our Vespas and our matching pink jackets and rent a video every day going through alphabetically so that we have an excuse to hang out with him, and also so we have some really weird movie to watch and comment on together. Except that one day when he goes across the street to the coffee shop, the usual owner operator isn't there. There's this really cute hipster behind the counter, and Gus is stupefied. And it goes from there, and it's ridiculously sweet, and I identified so much with Gus that I cried a lot. The title comes from the fact that for the first time in his life, Gus feels the need to mask. He never felt that way before, partially because men are less socialized to think they need to fit in, so a lot of men with autism don't mask nearly as much as women in the first place, and then Gus specifically had such a supportive father that he was just accepted exactly the way he was and just never really had a super need to mask. But then he finds out that this super cute guy thinks he's weird, so he thinks that he needs to figure out how to be a normal person using the internet in order to woo this adorable guy. And so that whole lack of acceptance for yourself and thinking you're weird and having it hurt so much when other people think you're weird was so close to my heart. And then it had, of course, all the aceness going around that was so precious, and the really strong and important platonic relationships with these wonderful women. And of course it leads to the good kind of autism representation where they figure out that they don't actually have to change for the people around them. They can meet in the middle, and there's nothing wrong with not being neurotypical. It was just absolutely precious. I loved it so much. The last book I read and that I finished this morning was An Unkindness of Ghosts. Once again, going into this, I didn't know that the main character was autistic. I only found that out from Noria Reads like the day before I was gonna start it, and that made me so much more excited for it. Yeah, it has the classic thing where autistic people metaphors go over their head, which is never a thing that I've struggled with. I totally understand metaphors, but a lot of autistic people have that, and so it was interesting to see another example of that in fiction. I don't remember the last one I read where they didn't understand metaphors, but anyway, like that guy in Guardians of the Galaxy, this is one of the few quotes I actually have memorized. Even though I haven't actually seen the film, he's not good with metaphors. They go over his head, and then he says, "Nothing goes over my head, I would catch it," which is hilarious. And, perfect. And so, An Unkindness of Ghosts, you've probably heard what it's about. It's by River Solomon, the same person who wrote The Deep. River Solomon is non-binary, and I wanted to read across the spectrum. So, oh, I forgot to mention there is a bi/pan person who is a secondary character in a memory called Empire. We don't know, we just know that they are attracted sexually and romantically to multiple genders. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is because I wanted to read something with lesbians, something with gay people, something with bi/pan people, something with genderqueer or trans people, something with asexuals. And I managed that once I had read An Unkindness of Ghosts, because besides the author being non-binary, they include that in their books. So like there is a whole deck, this intergenerational spaceship, where there are a bunch of what sounds like is being described as intersex people. And then one of the main characters, named Theo, is living as a man, was assigned male at birth, but is either questioning or is a trans woman or is non-binary, does not feel comfortable with he/him pronouns / masculineness. And then the main character was assigned female at birth, but basically everyone who is in her class on her like social class on the ship is assigned female at birth, and then they just can become like trans-masculine if they like decide they want to be masculine. There is a lot of gender diversity going on the ship. Lots of different ways of different what are they called, subcultures or mini cultures throughout the ship, how they would handle gender differently. And it was absolutely fascinating. I really liked the main character's autism. She talks a lot more formally than I do. She's actually a lot like 7 of 9, who is someone I've talked about in the past, is kind of autistic-ish. It's kind of like autistic coding. Is that a thing, like queer coding? Because it seems like there's a lot of characters who are coded autism, but not quite, and not officially, like 7 of 9, Odo, Bones, people like that. But anyway, she is very 7 of 9-ish, and 7 of 9 is a very precious character to my heart, so I really enjoyed that. And this is a very heavy book in that there's slavery going on. This is a very racist ship where you're divided up by black people on the bottom. I don't really know where other races fit in, or if they're present. There might be some people who sound like they're being described as Hispanic, possibly, but most of the race relations that are talked about are between black people and white people. And there's a lot of slavery related stuff, like rape, a lot of that. It's not described in detail or graphicness, which I really appreciate, and actually that made it way easier to read. I read this a lot faster than I expected to. I read it in 3 or 4 days, and usually stuff with heavy topics like that takes me a week or 2 at least. This was very much where it would say that these bad things were going on, and then it would go on to the next thing. And I'm not sure if that is part of the author's style, if they like to not dwell on really graphic stuff, or if that was a representation of the main character's autism, in that we tend to be really good at compartmentalizing. And it was definitely shown that the main character and the characters around her processed and dealt with their repeated traumas by compartmentalizing them and pushing them away. But the way the book was written, you didn't have to live through the rapes and the beatings and things like that. You were just told about them. and so it was a lot easier to exit the book and not have that running around in my head all the time. The world building was fascinating. Didn't totally make sense, but a lot of sci-fis don't, which might be a reason I like fantasy better, because I don't care if it makes sense, because I give it more leeway not to make sense, whereas with sci-fi I'm like, no, you have to make this make sense because you're basing it on science. So the spaceship revolves around a miniature star that they have created artificially, and there's a lot of description of how the decks move around so that the light and the heat and everything goes around to the various crops that need it, and how the energy gets distributed throughout the ship, and how the society works to keep slavery in place, but there's also some capitalism going on the upper decks, and because there's upper and lower decks, and I'm not sure how that works with the circular part in the middle maybe that revolves around the sun. I don't know how the upper and lower works in regard to that. So it was a bit confusing, but also really cool. I really liked the main character and her love interest Theo. Their relationship was freaking adorable. The plot a lot made sense, and the characterization made a lot of sense until like the fourth quarter, and then it just went boom, straight off the rails, and I didn't understand why the main character was doing what she was doing. Instead of, you know, murdering some people, she like chose to just tick them off, people who had power over her, and I don't know why she chose to do that. Maybe I'm more homicidal than other people, but it seems like she would be homicidal after everything that had been done to her at this point, and would recognize that, yeah, this person needs to be gone now. There's a part at the end that makes some sense, but all the things around it don't make sense, and I don't really understand the ending, why it was done that way, and why the main character wanted to do what she did, but it doesn't make it a bad book. It didn't ruin the book for me. I really enjoyed it more as an experience. I don't know if it'll be a reread. I might reread portions of it because I really did like some of the portions, the romantic portions, and some of the parts that dealt with a lot of the main character's autism that were really interesting. But I am glad to have it for my shelves. Oh, I put it to the side over here so that I can actually pick it up, because it's the one book that I didn't read in e-form this month, or for this wrap up. So I do have it, and it has a nice black spine, so we can go with my nice black books, and it's got a place cleared for it, and I'm very happy with it, so I'm glad about that. And I definitely look forward to reading more by River Solomon, because they are pretty amazing. And I think that's all I wanted to talk to you about. I'm going to the beach next week, so there's going to be a beach reading vlog, hopefully, if I read while I'm at the beach. Hopefully I'm going to be reading a bunch of Shakespeare-ish stuff for the All the World's a Page readathon, hosted by Olivia from Olivia's Catastrophe, and Kara from Wild Book Garden, and someone else from a Shakespeare-oriented channel who I can't remember the name of. But anyway, that'll be linked below. I'm really excited for it. I've got some fun plans, but I will tell you about that hopefully during my beach reading vlog. Tell me your favorite book that you read this month, or in the last couple of weeks, if you have too many to choose from. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!